I'm Monica Black Robinson. I work at Washington University. Areas of focus are in human resources, career development, diversity and inclusion. And I'm also a consultant. I love to go out in the community and also share D&I and best practices and etiquette as well. I do miss getting out with hands-on etiquette, but I'm able to do this via Zoom these days. So I enjoy teaching, and that's just something that I love to do. And yes, these are challenging times. Racism, social issues, or just everyone's talking about it, everybody's marching about it, and for good reason. And while everybody's talking about it, sometimes it's difficult, it's challenging, it's uncomfortable to talk about. But nothing is going to change until we do have dialogue and have conversation. And so being aware of how to do that, first of all, take a deep breath and really sink into a dialogue of learning, of understanding, and then that will progress to empathy as well. But some of the productive steps that you can take when having a dialogue, really the goal is to understand each other's perspective.
Sure.
Because you're going to have different perspectives based on your cycle of socialization, how you grew up, what you've experienced, what you've been exposed to. And that would mean that everybody's been exposed to something different. Therefore, they have a different perspective.
Right, for sure. And which,
right.
Depending on whether we're talking about friends and this is happening, or family members and socially, or people that we work with, we
exactly
are coming to the table with really completely unique experiences and perspectives, right?
Unique, wonderful, interesting, sad, happy, a little bit of everything. So it's going to be important to be able to agree to disagree. And do it in a way that is not a debate. When you're debating, you're arguing, and that's not going to help anything. But when you're having dialogue and you're seeking understanding of different perspectives, so it's okay that we can agree to disagree, but still communicate. And of course, that's always going to be good in a working environment, because sometimes you're not going to always agree on things, but you have to work together and support each other. So again, agreeing to disagree.
Yeah.
You also assume goodwill. Everybody has not experienced everything, so they probably have good intentions, but maybe they stepped on your toe and by accident. So, just assume that. Don't go in thinking that everybody is, in a bad mood or naturally, mean. Maybe they had something that happened to them that day. Could have had a bad experience. Something in the family could have happened. In these COVID times, you don't know what could happen to anyone and their family. So assume goodwill. And then maintain confidentiality. When people are having conversations with you, they're not really talking to you so you can go share it with everyone, unless they say it's okay for you to share.
Sure. Well, and that would apply, when I think about, members of the RISE community and even myself. So these tough conversations, especially these days, they're coming up. Maybe we're leaders in our organization and we're saying, hey, we need to do some work. Maybe we are members of our own family. Maybe we're parents and we're saying, I want to lead us through doing this learning and work and growth. Or even just on the street with our friends socially. I think, when I think about having these conversations, there's the coming to the table to even with your mindset. Because sometimes you can structure and okay, on Monday at 9:30, we're having a diversity and inclusion event within our team. And that's a great thing for, I think, organizations and companies to be having right now. But a lot of these conversations and opportunities are coming to have these tough conversations are probably happening on the fly every single day. They might be happening on social media. They would be happening on Zoom calls. So, when I think about this is the mindset that we should try to get in just from a general walking around the universe, or before we come to maybe a formalized session, is what you're saying is assuming goodwill in people, assuming, intent over impact and the confidentiality. So you're saying
Yes.
whether it's formal or casual to kind of come
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And then also speak from your own experience, using, I experienced this and that happened to me and this is what I did versus, I saw it on Facebook and it said this, so everything on Facebook is true, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
And if you see something and you think it might be true, you better do some additional research just to make sure. So you're speaking from your own experience, or you're speaking from, you can even say content research. I saw this and I wanted to dig a little deeper and I found that this is XYZ and it seems to be true. What do you think about that? Now you can talk about things that way, but just to assume that whatever you see is, on social media is going to be true. If it might just be better just to stick to your own lived experiences. But if you want to do social media, do additional research to do so that you can have that conversation.
Yeah. Do you think that people deflect to sort of because it's vulnerable to talk about our own experiences and that's almost maybe a safe place to go and say, oh, well, I saw or I heard about?
Yeah, it's scary. This is hardcore stuff. It's not for the faint of heart, and you have to lean into discomfort.
Mm.
Really want to get to the bottom of it, so that you can move past it.
Mm-hmm.
Always going to feel that being uncomfortable until you go through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and you talked about the confidentiality and that's what makes people feel safe, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so feeling safe to have these conversations is probably a really key part of it. Because if you feel like if I speak up, well, now Monica's going to go, I feel confident that, it's a friend and someone I trust and know you're not going to turn to someone and say, oh my gosh, Kate said this really offensive thing to me and this is my
Yeah.
But I guess that's not always assumed. And so establishing that place of trust and safety, because if we don't feel safe, we can't have productive, real, open, and honest conversations. Is that right?
Exactly. And then looking at it as a learning, you might say something, but there might be a reason why you said that. And maybe if I understand the reason why, then I can have some empathy about why you said it. And I can even give you more information about how that landed on me and maybe a not so positive way. And then therefore we end up teaching each other and learning from each other. And with that understanding, we can move past that, change some things, because we're more aware, we've been exposed, we have the conversation. So, you're not to challenge the idea, challenge the idea or the experience, not the person.
Yeah. Well,
Mm-hmm.
well, and it's important, like being vulnerable and open and honest is probably a really key part of this, because if I'm guarded or I'm only telling a half truth, then as you said, you're not necessarily, neither of us are getting to the full truth of it.
Right. Yeah. It's important to be in a safe space in terms of feeling safe and feeling like you can trust the person to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And it's about learning, educating ourselves about different perspectives, not so much about damaging people. And that's, again, when you're assuming goodwill, and you're not, I mean, if we are having this conversation and we're working together, there may be some common ground that we have, and we just need to work on growing that and growing the relationship. And as that happens, we better understand our experiences, our lived experiences, some of the things that we grew up with. That doesn't determine who you are. You determine who you are in that. And so these are the things that you can learn together in dialogue. Because if you don't talk about things, you can't move past things.
Yeah. Well, so in that vulnerability that comes with total openness and honesty and assuming goodwill, once we set the stage that then you say really open, I know that I have, even in my best of intentions, said and done things that have been offensive or hurtful to someone. So, and not, I don't actually think in the place of racism, I don't know that that has been in the reverse necessarily, but when I think about from being a woman, ageism, all of these,
All the is, yes.
we are on the giving and receiving side of many of these isms that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us have loaded and prejudiced thoughts and feelings about. And so I have been on the receiving end of a offensive words, terms, thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
ideas, actions. Sometimes it's hard to know as the receiver of something offensive the right way to respond that is
Mm-hmm.
productive, that's going to draw attention and lead to growth, as opposed to sometimes what you might want to do is, your animal instinct sometimes is to get angry or mad or cry and sad or shut down
Mm-hmm.
or get defensive and start acknowledging, or giving air to that negative thought. I mean,
Right,
when I
right.
think about all the different ways that I've responded from that and seeing other people respond. So when we get into these open, honest conversations, I think about both sides of it is what happens and how should we act when we hear something offensive or inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And then also what to do when we say something intentionally, hopefully unintentionally or otherwise, that ends up being hurtful and offensive.
Mm-hmm.
So as we navigate these tough conversations, what can people do as the giver and the receiver of these comments in a way that then leads to productivity, learning, and growth?
Okay, so I have these six techniques that you can use. I've taught this at Washington University many times. The first thing you can do is assume good intent and explain impact. Again, we're going to assume that maybe you haven't experienced somebody like me, or something made you say something that you've heard before and you just repeated it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to assume good intent and explain impact, meaning how it landed on me.
Okay, so tell
That
me how
will
that looks. Like, if I,
So, um, uh, I'm not well versed in insults,
oh,
but
it's true. Good. That's a good
if
place.
someone could say to me, you're really uh, you're really nice. You're very articulate
Ah, yes.
all the time. You're very articulate. So I'm going to assume that you don't know what that means when you say that. That's what I'm going to assume.
Okay.
Um, and so I'm going to explain impact, meaning, well, in a way that will help you learn, meaning that, well, it might be because my mother was an English teacher.
Mm,
You may be thinking that I'm very articulate for a person of color,
mm,
but I'm telling you, I'm articulate because my mother was an English teacher, and I could not just talk any kind of way amongst the English teacher. And so, even my father said, I spoke better English when I was in kindergarten, but still, education and speaking and all of that was very important to my family. So that's why, in addition to my family and friends that I have, this is not uncommon.
mm.
So perhaps more exposure might be good, and then you won't think that me being articulate is a thing.
Sure.
Just because I'm articulate and so are you.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
So
there's
that's the no.
impact,
That's one.
explaining impact and intent. So drawing awareness to,
Yes.
ooh, I just said something that was, so impact and intent. I love.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like pulling out something that's not unusual for you, but you think it's unusual for me.
Okay.
So that's where you can, when someone says something, assume good intent and explain impact.
Mhm.
The next thing you can do is just ask the question. And on the same thing, you said I'm articulate. And I would ask, well, why do you say that?
Okay.
That gives you pause. You
Okay.
have to think about, well, why is she asking me that question? Did I say something wrong? Or something like that?
Uh-huh.
You're really going to have to tell me, well, why did you ask me that question? And then we then can have dialogue about it.
Mm-hmm.
well, I just, I think you speak well or whatever, whatever, and then I'll probably tell the same story that I just told a few minutes ago about my mother being an English teacher.
Sure.
But again, you have to get people to own what they say
Mm,
in a way that's not hurtful. I'm not attacking them, but I'm just asking the question. And we're hoping to um, enlighten them on some things, that they might ask in the future or
yeah,
might not do in the future.
yeah.
Uh, so that's number two.
Right.
Interrupt and redirect, which is a favorite one, especially at work, because I just don't have time or the energy to really explain things to you right now, but I can talk later, just not right now. Or, you know, a lot of times you're in a staff meeting or something like that, and someone might say something inappropriate
Mhm.
and redirect, you know,
Okay. So it's
usually,
drawing attention to it in the moment,
yes,
but
yes.
then redirecting, assigning, in the future is what we're going to do. Or
Right, right. It still has an impact, even if it doesn't explain it right in the moment, because it does kind of like say, I'm not in agreement, but I can't talk right now.
either, yeah, it's not appropriate to do so, the environment won't suit that. Or perhaps if you need to collect your thoughts,
Yes,
I could
yes,
see that
yes.
being, you get redirected for later. Okay, all right.
Absolutely. Again,
Exactly.
we want to make sure we have the right tone when we're doing this too. And sometimes collecting your thoughts, counting to 10 or 20 will allow you to get there. Um, and then the fourth is broaden to universal human behavior. There's so many things that we all do alike, like breathing.
Mhm.
We all do that. You and I both do that. So um, a lot of times, people will act as if only one group does a certain thing, and that's stereotyping.
Mm.
Someone may assume that someone who's Asian, they'll be good at math. I'm terrible at math. Why don't you handle the financial part of this project? And what do you mean? You don't know if they're good at math or not. They're the individual, not the stereotype. So you've got
Sure.
to broaden it to uh, universal human behavior, because more than one person or group can be good at a certain thing.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Okay.
I think so, yes. You can make it individual. If someone says a whole group gets on my nerves,
Mm.
a whole group gets on my nerves, they're stereotyping. Well, it's an opportunity to then say, well, do you mean the whole group or this one particular person?
Mhm.
Then
Mhm.
you can have conversation, because it may be that one particular person, which is fine.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that it's the whole group. And so sometimes when someone says, they're speaking of a whole group, they're really thinking of that one person,
Mm.
but they're blaming the whole group. So having a discussion to kind of mitigate that into that individual. Okay, I can concede. I understand because so and so gets on my nerves too, but that's not the whole group.
Mhm. And then does that lead to then introspection for the person? Again, the shift from learning to then growth by,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to silence, as opposed to not calling it out or not reflecting on it and doing so in the moment too.
Right. Well, these are speaking up techniques. And, a lot of times, even if you can't say anything and have dialogue in the moment, you can say something.
Mhm.
And this next one would be the one thing you could do, either verbally or facially. I'm not good at playing cards because you can read my face. So, but you can say, ouch, like, ouch, you stepped on my toe, and ouch. That will cause someone to pause again and think, well, why are they saying ouch? And if
Mhm.
they ask you, well, why did you say ouch? Or why are you looking like that?
Yeah.
There's a reason, but I'd love to talk to you about it later. Would it be okay if we can discuss this, after the meeting or in about 10 minutes or, after dinner or whatever?
Mhm.
Where you can have a conversation in the right tone, with your collected thoughts to really explain why that was a ouch for you. And those are those speaking up techniques.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Well, so then I think with that from the being the receiver to allow you to speak up. But then I think also too, then in the reverse. So as I navigate, as I'm personally on a journey of navigating these really difficult conversations and
Mm-hmm.
important conversations about race, I know that unfortunately I already have and surely will unfortunately continue to unintentionally say things that might be um, inappropriate, offensive, so let's say I'm talking to you and you say ouch, and
Mm-hmm.
you're able to use a lot of these speaking up techniques. As the speaker, I feel like I have a couple of available responses to me, some of which are appropriate or are productive and some that aren't. I can see when you start to feel like, okay, I messed up. Ouch. Oh, she said ouch. I stepped on her toe. I could start apologizing like crazy. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I want to mitigate the apology, or I want to mitigate the pain that I've caused.
Uh-huh.
But then how do I really grow from that? Or it's being defensive. Oh, well, oh, you're offended. But well, I said that because of this, that, and the other, or getting defensive and over explaining and doing these things. Like I can think of a lot of unproductive ways that either I myself or I have seen others respond when
Mm-hmm.
their inappropriateness is called attention to. What advice would you have for a more appropriate or productive way for when we get called out or acknowledge are inappropriate or whatever is acknowledged or called out?
Well, I think you kind of did it in the lead in to this question, meaning you say, there's a lot that I don't know, but
Mm,
because I want to know and I want to learn. And I'm hoping that through dialogue, there's going to be some things that I'm going to learn that I didn't know before. So if
mm,
I make mistakes, let me apologize up front because I don't even know what they're going to be. But let's dig in and I want to learn. So let's have this conversation.
and that should be well received.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you don't know what you don't know.
yeah.
It's just whether it's food, before I had sushi, I did not know I liked it. So, you don't know what you don't know until you try it. And so you just have to at least preface it by saying, I don't know if I'm going to like this. I've never had it before. I've never done this before. Um, but I'd like to explore. I want to learn. I'm curious.
Mm,
Maybe it's something that I wasn't exposed to. Again, I'm always referring back to that cycle of socialization because your exposure is what determines where you are. And then your curiosity carries that forward. And then your choice determines what direction you're going in.
mm, mm. So then I'm thinking too, I'm like, okay, I called this out. Is it appropriate or preferred or to circle back to it later? Let's say you would call it, and then I say, hey, I don't know about this. I need to learn more about this. I need to talk about this. Is it smart? Is it good for me to come back later and say, hey, Monica, I said XYZ, and I'm so glad that you called attention to this. I've been doing some learning and reading, and I wanted to share with you.
Yes, I was just going to say that. I
Oh,
was
good.
going to
Okay.
say that because that's your work to do. So I've called you out, go to work, and then we can talk about what you've learned and I can confirm or give you more information or whatever. But yes, absolutely. Exactly what you said.
Oh, good. Oh, no, we didn't even talk about that. Well, this honestly, it is really helpful because I think even just going through and hearing these things, the mindset that I can do myself, share with others of, as you said, those 6 things about assuming goodwill, intent, all of those things. It's like getting in the right
Mm-hmm.
mind and confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
If all of us were to take that on, then
Mm-hmm.
we feel more equipped so that then when, not if, we do and say things that might be good, then how to address them and call them out in the moment and then in an appropriate way. and then also how to respond. I personally feel super much more well equipped from that. Is there anything else though that, as I said, is kind of recapping, we talk about anything else that you think is important for myself, but also others to know when it comes to this really important time and these really important conversations in work?
Well, it's a hard time right now. I know a lot of people are working from home, if they're able to do that, and we're Zooming a lot.
Mm,
Some people are getting Zoom fatigue. Just try to keep it, have patience with yourself,
mm,
um, and just maintaining the right tone, being considerate still, even via Zoom, even having eye contact via Zoom and
mhm,
smile via Zoom. I think you can treat it as if you're actually speaking to people, not a screen,
mm.
so that it's still authentic and people can still feel, um, uh, can feel you through the Zoom lens. And being sincere,
Yeah,
being sincere. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I would also love to, kind of touch on just quickly, I am a white woman and I do personally, I walk through the world with this, with feelings of guilt and remorse and sadness and wanting to do better and then at the same time and wanting to grow, but at the same time, sometimes not knowing where to turn and what to do. And it feels overwhelming. And it's like, and I know the saying is, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Mm-hmm.
What, in your opinion, as someone who is so entrenched and does this work all the time, what are some of those initial first bites that you would recommend that someone like myself take to really make
Well,
growth and learn?
one of the things you can do is recognize that racism is a present and current problem. It didn't just get here, but it's really out there now. And acknowledging that it does exist
Yeah.
is the first thing. Um, I think it's also really important to educate yourself about it. We all need to educate ourselves about history of race. Um,
Mhm.
because unfortunately, we didn't all learn about it in high school. It wasn't printed in the complete version in the books.
Sure.
So we can only be accountable for what was in the books. However, there's more that we need to do. And as you said earlier about, if you say something and I call it out, then you go do some research.
Mhm.
We have that conversation. So again, doing the research, being well versed in it and understanding the history.
Mhm.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Also, being comfortable making yourself honorable,
Yeah.
your own biases and knowledge gaps. We all don't know everything, but as long as we have a willingness to learn, um, I think that says a lot. Um, and listen to others who think and look differently than
Mhm.
you. So intentionally learn from others
Mhm.
that are different from you.
Yeah.
That's something that you can do that's ongoing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there some favorite, whether it's authors or thought leaders, Instagram accounts and anything like that that you find yourself turning to?
Um, let's see. I do a lot of, who I like a lot. She doesn't do so much on necessarily DNI, but Brene Brown, I love her. Um,
I mean,
think in terms, empathy is not just, it's not about just feeling sorry, it's
mhm.
understanding. And when you understand, that means that you have gotten some more information,
Yeah.
some history behind things, and you have empathy. You understand a little bit more about what someone's going through. And then as you understand, it makes it easier to partner with people.
Mhm.
It's been amazing the marches that went on and the diversity within the marches is diverse like I've never seen it before. And I think that's because this is something that everybody went through together. In addition to the pandemic,
Sure.
had time to actually visualize and see things that they haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And we all did together. And so that's refreshing that to see us all coming together like that. And the only way we can continue that is really to continue the conversation, so that we can make the change really come forth.
Mm. Well, I think that is true and beautiful, and there's nothing it's so true. It's like we're in this together and continuing the work, continuing the conversation, and conversations like this, I'm very grateful for, because I do feel safe and I feel seen and all of the things that you just shared. So thank you, Monica, for taking this time with me and all of our friends who are joining us. So
you're welcome. And of course, there are any number of authors and books and topics of discussion that are out there. And so, I'm always available for that information, as I am with, as I do consulting and things like that. So, I'm open to that as well.
I love that. I love that, Monica. Thank you so much for being with me today. And I hope this was as helpful of a conversation for you and anyone who's joining us as it was for me. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.